My wife's family tradition is going to ruin our son's life. Elena was 8 months pregnant when her mother showed up at our house with a lawyer and a stack of paperwork trying to legally force us to name our unborn son Cain. I'd known this was coming. For 400 years, the firstborn son in the Whitfield line had been named Cain. There was a framed family tree in her parents' dining room, tracing every Cain back to the 1600s. Elena was a second child and a daughter, so she'd been spared and named Elena. Her older brother hadn't been so lucky he legally was Cain, but everyone, including his own parents most days, called him Cain, because nobody wants to introduce themselves with a name that makes strangers think of a murderer. When Elena got pregnant, her family lit up. Because Cain only had daughters and the tradition needed a vessel, her father toasted to baby Cain at dinner. I laughed, assuming it was a joke. Nobody else laughed. That night, Elena told me there was no chance we'd use that name. She said she'd always hated the tradition and thought it was cruel. We picked Milo instead and braced for her parents to be upset. We had no idea what was coming. Her family didn't get upset, they mobilized. They showed up daily with fresh arguments. Her father explained, again and again, that Cain originally meant something like acquired and was a name of strength, ignoring that in the real world all anyone hears is the first murderer in the Bible. They bought monogrammed clothes, ordered a custom crib with Cain carved into the headboard, and turned their guest room into a nursery with his name on the door. Then Harold told me he'd already written the baby into the family trust legally, the money only released if the birth certificate said Cain. Aunts, uncles, even Grandpa Cain Sr. flew in from Florida to lean on us. Cain himself showed up and said, "It sucked for me, but you get used to it." I pointed out he'd changed what people called him. He said that was different. Elena started cracking. "Maybe it works as a middle name," she'd say. Then her parents dangled money college funds, a house down payment, a trust all contingent on the name. She started taking calls in another room, coming back stressed and quiet. At 8.5 months pregnant, her parents showed up with an actual lawyer and a contract, $200,000 and a guaranteed inheritance, in exchange for our signatures agreeing to name our son Cain. I threw them out of the house. Elena and I didn't speak for 2 days after that fight. Then her water broke 3 weeks early. I was racing to the hospital when a truck ran a red light 2 blocks away and hit my side of the car. I don't remember the ambulance. I woke up 12 hours later with a cast on my leg, taped ribs, and Elena sitting beside my hospital bed holding our son crying, handing me a birth certificate that read Cain. She told me her parents had been in the waiting room the entire time, telling her it's what I would have wanted, that I might not survive surgery, and she'd signed everything out of pure panic. I asked her to leave the room. I couldn't look at her. That night, a social worker told me birth certificate amendments were possible through the courts and connected me with Warren Doyle, the hospital's patient advocate. Warren walked me through the process and handed me the number of a family law attorney, Diane Colton, when Elena's parents tried to show up that evening with a photographer for newborn pictures. The nurses turned them away at my request. Discharge day, Elena's parents were on our porch with balloons and a banner reading "Welcome Home, Cain." I made her take it down before we went inside. That first night home was silent and exhausted, a screaming newborn, a marriage running on fumes. At 3 a.m., Elena floated the idea of using both names depending on the situation. I told her that was exactly the kind of compromise that got us here. The next morning, Harold showed up in a suit with the trust documents, highlighted in yellow, certified birth certificate proving the legal first name was Cain within 30 days, or the inheritance was gone and Elena would be cut out of the will too for failing the family obligation. Later that day, I found the hospital's original pre-registration form. Elena had written Milo under planned baby name in her own handwriting. Someone else, in blue ink, had crossed it out and written Cain above it. The hospital confirmed Elena's mother had filed the change herself the day of the birth. They'd planned this. All of it. Diane Colton took our case and said birth certificate amendments were legally viable when one parent signs without true consent, especially while medicated, exhausted, and believing her spouse might be dying. She wanted documentation. Every text, every email, every monogrammed item, every meeting. the altered hospital form, the $200,000 contract. Elena spent days writing a 12-page timeline of the pressure campaign. Reading it back, she said out loud for the first time that her parents had run something closer to a psychological operation than a family tradition. We started therapy with Adrian Voss because the marriage was hanging by a thread. In one session, Adrian asked us to picture Milo at 18, asking why we made the choices we made. Elena broke down. She said she'd chosen her parents' approval over our partnership in the most important moment of our lives, and she couldn't unsee it anymore. Then, the retaliation started for real. I posted a photo of the baby with no name in the caption. Within hours, the extended family group chat exploded accusations of disrespecting 400 years of heritage, of spitting on the family name. Elena's father typed in all caps that the birth certificate was what mattered, and the charade needed to stop. Her parents showed up unannounced with the carved crib strapped to a truck. Elena refused to let it in the house. A few days later, an envelope arrived, a check for $200,000, memo line reading for Kane's future conditional acceptance of family tradition. Diane told us not to touch it, cashing it could be used as evidence we'd accepted the arrangement. That same week, Kane messaged me privately. He apologized for never warning us how far his parents would go. He admitted his own childhood under the name Kane had been miserable, that he still flinched every time a stranger read his legal documents. He offered to testify. He connected us with Rosa Bennett, a mediator who'd helped him set boundaries years earlier. The mediation session went nowhere. Harold wouldn't budge on the trust's exact wording. Margaret cried through the whole thing. And neither would admit the pressure campaign had been inappropriate. But it was the last straw Elena needed. Walking out of that room, she told me for the first time that she was done trying to make her parents see reason. She just wanted our son's name back. With Warren's affidavit, the altered hospital form, and 12 pages of documented coercion, Diane filed the petition. The judge reviewed the evidence, a pressured, medicated signature made without the father's knowledge, and clear proof of a parent's paperwork forged after the fact, and granted an expedited amendment. 6 weeks after he was born, our son's birth certificate finally read Milo Marsh. Elena's parents didn't come to the hearing. They didn't call. For months, the family group chat went quiet on our end, and honestly, quieter was better. Elena grieved that distance, but she stopped defending it. Kane came to Milo's first birthday alone, without his parents, and gave him a small toy truck instead of anything monogrammed. We never cashed the check. It's still in the folder with everything else. A reminder that we said no when it would have been so easy to say yes. Elena and I are still in therapy, still repairing what almost broke us. But Milo is Milo, not Kane. Not a symbol of a 400-year-old bargain, just our son, growing up with a name we chose because we loved him, not because we were afraid of what a piece of paper might cost us.